That's what we do.
Oh, yeah.
Folks on. We're having phone service too. Do we have somebody on the phone, maybe? All right.
It's being videotaped.
Videotape, okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming today. In particular, we want to thank our sponsors, Westlaw, John Klipko with Westlaw. Shelley Hunter with U.S. Legal Support. I knew you from Hunter and Geist. I can't place you with U.S. Legal, but thank you both for sponsoring this. Westlaw sponsored the lunch, and U.S. Legal Support is doing the audio. And it's these kind of community relations with other members of the legal community that are really helping to propel LawBank beyond our basic community. We also have representatives from Oksana Inc., who you've met before, Beth and Valerie from Scottsdale, Phoenix, who are doing some amazing things with providing fixed fee legal services to companies. So keep that in mind, Oksana. And we have several members here at LawBank that are part of that community. So when I say that I am the dumbest guy in this group right here, I mean it.
That's a lie.
You really have an unbelievably talented folks right here. Pat Meyers, when I looked at his LinkedIn page, I mean, it was like 3 pages of everything he's done, and you're only like 35, so
Yeah, plus tax.
you must have started when you were in the submarine, when you were at the Navy in the submarine division. You know, he was a little kid getting into the crawl spaces. Quizno, Smashburger, Consumer Capital, Justice Erickson with the Colorado Supreme Court, Governor Hickenlooper, presidential candidate Hickenlooper, special advisor to the U.S. Senate candidate, hopefully our next senator, Hickenlooper. That has an amazing talent. I ran into him shortly before I actually came here to LawBank, after I had opened it but was still too scared to come. I ran into him at Capitol Grill in the bar one day and I said, "What are you doing these days?" He goes, "I think I'm going to go back to school for a little while." I think he went to Hastings just, to get a degree, and you didn't get a degree, or just...
It was Georgetown, and I did.
Oh, was it Georgetown? Sorry.
That's okay.
It was Hastings was undergrad?
No,
or,
Hastings was
law school.
Yeah.
Georgetown, just for a year, just to learn something new. But Pat is an amazing guy, and you'll maybe see him in the building once in a while. We used to, or not so much
Not so much anymore, but...
All right. Well, he used to be here a lot. He literally, a funny story, I don't think Pat even knows how I know Pat. 1997, I was an associate at Brownstein, and I was doing real estate, and my mentor, a guy named Ed Barad, comes to me. This is after you left Moy White. He went into Quizno's as GC. He says, Pat Meyers called me up from Quizno, says, I was wondering whether we would do fixed fee lease negotiations for Quiznos around the country. Like, I don't know, $2,000, $2,500 a pop. I mean, literally the forerunner of fixed fee kind of, let's set our fees, let's do it, let's provide a reasonable fee. I said, hell yeah, let's do that. This was when they were just getting started. And the firm turned it down. They didn't want to get into that business of fixed fee. So I'm sure you probably did like 5,000 leases after that. So do the math. I mean, so basically, because the firm was too narrow-minded, I think they walked away from probably at least $1 million, if not more.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
My good friend, also Rob Simmons, who also blows me away with his credentials. University of Virginia Law School, Dartmouth College. Rob and I met first when he was the Associate General Counsel at MolsonCoors, then MolsonCoors. He's had a varied career both in law firms and in in-house counsel. Currently, Rob is the head of legal for Caliper Foods, based in Commerce City, which is a consumer packaged food goods company creating hemp-derived soluble cannabinoids. Is that a way to pronounce it?
Yeah.
I worked on that for a week. Cannabinoids to consumers. So it's I don't know how long has the company been around for?
5 years.
5 years.
And I've been there 3 months.
But Rob again, as a guy, when we talk, he's like, oh, I got to get into this business of CBD, hemp, THC. I mean, as an investor, he was looking at it. He really looked at the industry as a whole before he even got interested. He did a short stint as an associate general counsel at DaVita Healthcare, and had this opportunity to really take the reins of the legal department of Caliper Foods, and jumped on it immediately. He and I just enjoyed a wonderful lunch. Usually I take guys like them to the Palm or to Capitol Grill or to Garden Grace, but I said, oh, there's this great roadside greasy spoon at like 58 right by the Denver Mart called the Red Rooster Cafe. I said, I've always wanted to go to it. I said, do you mind? He's like, sure, I love that stuff. I said, just don't wear your suit. It's going to smell for you. He came in anyway. He loved it. We had the best time I think we had at lunch.
Yeah.
These were just the best food and the best people ever. So anyway, thank you both so much for agreeing to do this. I won't go around the room, but LawBank is a community of independent practitioners. We have 115 lawyers between our 3 locations.
Wow.
It's only a small handful, mostly in the transactional practice areas, estate planning, corporate tax, securities, real estate, employment. It really runs the gamut. And what we're trying to do is to figure out how best to serve companies that you work with, or the companies you work for and with and you own, and figure out how we as a collective of independent practitioners can serve companies like yours or your prior iterations, so that we can maintain our independence but still be able to holistically serve big companies like you're used to.
Right.
So with that, I'm going to start with some questions, if you don't mind. I'm going to just to kick off the questions and answers. Clearly, a lot of people are here today to figure out how the hell they get into guys like you. If they don't know you socially, or should they know you socially, how would you figure out how to make a decision to hire a solo practitioner or a small firm? Start with you, Rob. You want to start?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the intro, Jay. I'm a big believer in LawBank. And just a couple of initial thoughts. I'm a big believer that you hire the lawyer and not the law firm. So whether you're a solo practitioner or working in a small firm or a large firm, with all due respect to any Brownstein refugees here, or even Moy White refugees, hire the lawyer, not the law firm. It's number one, so just something to keep in mind. But what that means is that your reputation is everything. And I'll just tell you this quick anecdote. I was at DU a couple of years ago and was asked by Todd Rogers, the Career Development Dean, to give a presentation to a combination of law students and marketing professionals who were professional marketers working with a number of large firms in Denver. And so what I said to the group didn't make half of them happy at all. And I said, I don't really believe in glossy marketing materials and the portfolios that large firms will put together to pitch business. Because if I'm looking to hire additional outside counsel, I will just start asking around and making calls. And if it's a complex matter, it just means I make more calls. But there isn't a single glossy brochure or circular that I would receive that would ever move the needle one iota in terms of retaining that outside firm. It's really all about reputation. And I'll turn it over to Pat, and then we can talk more about what that means.
Yeah, and thank you. Thanks for showing up. And you get what you pay for, so this advice may not be worth very much, but you got a lunch out of it. And thank you, Jay. It's good to see you again. It's been a little while. I couldn't agree more. I would add this. I don't think I was in-house for 20 years, and then I went to work for the governor, and we also would hire outside counsel, and then I went to work for him when he was a candidate, and we hired outside counsel, and in all of that 23 plus years, I don't think the size of the firm ever made a difference to me about who I was hiring. I wanted to make sure who I was hiring had the resources to be able to do the job, but it was very, very much either I had worked with them in the past, and so I knew what they were capable of and knew how they worked, or and I guess I would put it into buckets as well. There were buckets of sort of, I won't say routine because that sounds kind of dumbing down, but stuff that you know is going to come up all the time. You're going to have some HR stuff, so I had a go-to HR lawyer. In our companies, we had a lot of IP. So I had a IP lawyer that I used for 15 years. And then you would have kind of vet the company stuff that we hadn't done before. In Quiznos, it was a non-bank bankruptcy restructuring. And so I started asking people who were in that world, who is gifted and who is going to scare the other people, the people on the other side, and ended up hiring this amazing guy, Bruce Bennett, Bruce Bennett was the lead bankruptcy lawyer for Detroit, and before that, for the Dodgers. And he's become a close friend. And I called Bruce Bennett and I said, I want to hire you to help us with Quiznos, and that was my form of an RFP. And he said, I don't know who you are. How did you even get my name? And we went from there. But it's really about the lawyer. And so, and we can iterate a little bit. I think if you don't have a personal connection to people who are making hiring decisions, and it's not always the GC, right? Courtney Seeley, who was going to be here, and she works for MolsonCoors, and I hired her as an associate GC at Quiznos. She made a lot of hiring decisions because she was managing litigation at that point, and she would run it by me. But I think it's not only reputation; it's also doing things like this, like presentations, because there were a lot of people that I saw present and said, "Wow, they know quite a bit about that topic." And so then would start to develop a relationship with them, and maybe didn't even need them for anything right then, but would keep their name and would go back if something came up that I needed them for. So I know that's very simplistic, but
no, it really makes a lot of sense. And just to piggyback on what Pat has said, expertise is basically that's baseline. That's just what we expect, but it's more than that, because there are a lot of lawyers that have the expertise that can do what we need them to do, whether it's on daily operational things like reviewing commercial contracts, equipment leases, whatever it is, to things that are more complex. But it's also essentially it's a personality issue too, and so what I look for in outside counsel is not just the expertise, but also, it's a cliche, but it really is important, a cultural fit. Is this external counsel someone that I can bring in if needed and put them in front of business stakeholders inside the company, whether it's C-suite executives, or had a situation where I bypassed retaining outside counsel because I didn't have the confidence that outside counsel would communicate issues effectively to junior lawyers inside the legal department. It was a situation where a CLO had a very close relationship with outside counsel, but we bypassed this person because we felt that they would not communicate effectively with junior lawyers and would bypass even me and go straight to the CLO. Which is a no-no. I mean, I know that's further down on the list, but one of the quickest ways to sort of cause stress inside a legal department is when that outside counsel bypasses their direct contact inside the legal department and goes straight to the CLO, or even worse, keeps going back to one of the internal clients without any communication to their point of contact.
Yeah. And I think there's also a question about billing, so I can hold off if you want, or I can.
Go ahead.
The other thing, and just to set the frame a little bit, for those of you who have not been in-house, the legal department is not a profit center, and that is, it seems pretty obvious, but you get reminded of it a lot by senior management. And if you think about it, like most divisions either are profit centers, or if they're support like HR, IT, admin, they're pretty predictable. I mean, you kind of know what your growth rate is, you know who you're gonna have on salary, you know what their function is going to be during the year. Surprises happen, but not much. Legal is very tough because you can budget some things, but for example, litigation tends to be very difficult to budget. And so the other thing that will get you sideways with a general counsel or somebody who's running a P&L within the legal department is surprises. And most of us, I was a litigator and a prosecutor at one point, and so I understand litigation pretty well, and I understand that stuff happens that is very difficult to predict. But if you're not staying in constant touch with the client and saying, hey, you need to know what they just filed is going to cost you like $1 million in e-discovery, because unless we can figure out a way to get around it, if you get $1 million bill, that'll probably be the last conversation that you have with them. Right?
Yeah.
So to go back to the, how do we get into your guys' field of vision? You know, what do you think the best business development tools are if it's an unknown relationship? How do we create a new relationship with you? My old firm used to send out holiday cards all the time to every general counsel of every company that we could think of. And we got some great advice from Sam Walker, who was the CLO of MolsonCoors at the time, to stop doing that. Nobody reads those things. Those things, you know, I've actually come to that point where I look at the back, who sent it, and toss it. Holiday cards, don't worry about them. Even maybe now you can do the virtual ones. Let's move beyond the greeting cards. Hey, happy holidays! Look forward to getting together with you.
Right.
Anyway, what do you think what would bring a lawyer that you don't necessarily know into your field of vision?
Yeah, a couple of things. Very vigorous networking. Take advantage of Colorado Bar Association events. Make sure that you're affiliated and associated with some really good organizations inside Denver. For example, the Center for Legal Inclusiveness, which promotes diversity and inclusion. Give you an example of that, their annual fundraiser, the Mardi Gras fundraiser in February, is probably one of the best places to interact with in-house counsel in Denver. And even if you're not a member, you know, just develop a budget for the year and spring for tickets to go to some of these things, because there you can develop those relationships far more organically than the ways that Jay was talking about. Short of that, you know, just the direct approach is good. If I receive an email from a lawyer who is interested in having coffee with me, of course, with the possibility of pitching business, I'm more likely to respond to that than the holiday cards and the glossy marketing materials. If you just come out and say, well, yeah, I have a real passion and interest, and I've been working with FDA issues or with marijuana issues inside the state of Colorado, or just even procurement, supply chain, logistical issues, and just shoot me an email, it's more than likely that I would meet that person, just because of that forthright approach.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. Also, the inside counsel group is a pretty tight group. I mean, we don't know everybody, but we tend to know a lot of people. And there are groups like ACC, which has a local Denver chapter, and you can't be a member of it if you're outside counsel, but what you can do is go present at it. And a lot of times, if we were looking for counsel and didn't know, like, usually I knew where to start, but if it was like really something that we hadn't worked with before, the first place I would go would be other general counsel and just say, who have you worked with that's really good in this space? And oftentimes that would be an introduction, and I had a trust in the other general counsel, so that was a really good starting point. And there's some other, like one of the industries I was in was franchising, and so franchising, there are a couple of big franchise groups, IFA and the ABA franchise forums, and again, there's a million outside counsel at each of them, and they're all trying to get your attention, so it is a little painful and it's expensive, but if you can get up, start presenting, start meeting people, and just say, look, this is, like you said, I'm really passionate about X, like food distribution. I don't know why you'd be passionate about that, but you can.
But Pat is onto something, because I think it's certainly appropriate for any of you to approach the Colorado Bar Association and say, I'd like to present on topic X at some point in the next few months, because I know oftentimes you're scrambling for topics, and you're making their job easier of trying to come up with a meaningful, thoughtful program for the next 2 or 3 months. So approaching them proactively is not the worst thing to do. I mean, ACC and
I'll tell you what never really worked for me, and a lot of times we had franchising sort of has a lot of litigation. It's inherent in franchising, and there'd be an article that a lawsuit was filed, either we had filed a lawsuit or somebody had filed a lawsuit against us, and I'd start getting these like emails from firms I had never heard of saying, we can help you with this case, and I'm like, I don't think that's a very smart way to go hire somebody to defend the company in a lawsuit, so no. But again, if it was, and I had really talented litigators, but sometimes it would be a topic that's not their topic. And I would call them and say, who have you seen out there that's really good on X? And I think one thing you're hearing from us is if it's going to be a long-term relationship and it works, there's going to be trust on either side. And you have to be able to have an open conversation, and that includes back to billing. That includes them being able to come to you and saying, hey, you know what, the deal that we worked out is not working for me now. I mean, it's just, it's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. That's my bad, but can we sit down and talk about it? And you got to be open to saying, okay, let's sit down and talk about it. It's that kind of dialogue that really, because I'll wrap by saying, all of us are busy. Every lawyer who's any good who I've ever known has worked their butt off, no question. In-house lawyers are busy as well, and in-house lawyers, like, at one time I was the head of legal, finance, IT, HR, and admin. So, like, if I had to start, like, rethinking what my outside counsel was doing, that was too brain damaging. I was like, nah, I'm going to find somebody else who is, I don't have to do that with.
So to put a selfless plug in, LawBank is one of the finalists at the Center for Legal Inclusiveness event that we're being recognized as a finalist for our diversity, which, as you can look around, you see a lot of diversity here. To that end, how does diversity play into your decision making as to who to choose?
Yeah, it's something that's very important to me, both on a personal level, but also, fortunately, in the companies that I've worked for, particularly MolsonCoors, which really did an outstanding job of making sure that they had diverse representation with outside counsel. It comes from a place, both at MolsonCoors and certainly where I am now for Caliper, a consumer packaged goods company, that our external counsel, as well as all of our external vendors, reflect in some part the consumer base. It just makes commercial sense apart from everything else. And so it's important, but I do believe in diversity in its broadest form, diversity of thought and diversity of background, and it's important. And so if we're interviewing lawyers and law firms, the surest way to not get our business, now I'm going back to the MolsonCoors days, was for a large law firm to send 6 men all over the age of 60 dressed alike. I swear to you, they all came in Brooks Brothers blue blazers and khaki pants. I honestly, Jay, I was with Lee, and we just sort of said, well, what bus did they get off? I mean, they were all, 6 of them, and the reason why that diversity is important, because we want diversity of thought and input in bringing ideas to the table for us. It's really, it's just really important.
Yeah, by the way, we mentioned Sam Walker. Sam Walker, who is probably more like the Brooks Brothers guy in look, was all about diversity.
Yeah.
And in fact, you probably know more about this than I do, but Sam came to work for us at the head of our labor and employment when I was with the governor. But Sam was at Molson, and I think was very instrumental in changing the culture, changing the board. Really some impressive stuff. If you ever get a chance to meet him, he's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is really just important to keep in mind is that it's not really a zero-sum game. I think it's erroneous to look at a situation as like, okay, well, we're going to retain this woman outside counsel, which now means less work for everybody who is male. It just doesn't really work that way. The more diverse our support is, the better off our organization will do. I guarantee you it's in the numbers, certainly at MolsonCoors, which ultimately means more legal work for everybody. And so I think the more we can get away from thinking that it's a zero sum, if someone else gets it, that means I don't get it. It just hasn't borne out that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it was important to me. It was important to Courtney when she worked for me. I think, candidly, with women, it was easier. There are just more women in the law in practice, and very, very senior. It was like if we wanted to hire a woman for a project, that was never a problem. That was easy. It's a little bit harder. African American, Hispanic, Indian Americans, Native Americans. It's not that they don't exist. They do exist, but it's a little bit harder to find them, particularly if you're really focused on a very narrow set of skills. Like when I was looking for bankruptcy counsel or restructuring counsel, that's a very, very small world. There are a lot of women in it now. I think 10 years ago that probably was not the case. But it was candidly, it was pretty white.
But I think, Jay, to answer that question and sort of put a period at the end of the sentence, is that regardless of your religious, ethnic background, any of that, as a lawyer looking to generate a connection with any of our companies, the more open-minded and creative and forward-thinking and progressive you come across, that all of that is going to be very, very attractive to me as a prospective client. I just can't emphasize that enough, because some of you might be thinking, okay, well, I don't really fit in that category, I don't fit in that diverse category, what can I do? Well, what you can do is just be the best lawyers you can be, but just just demonstrate to me that you are progressive and open-minded and creative and looking to the future and willing to collaborate with me and any of the business stakeholders that I might put you in front of. Anything to the contrary, if you're sort of obstinate, set in your ways, not willing to sort of go with the flow of what the business demands are, it just is less likelihood that you'd be a good fit to support our work.
Yeah, I agree.
You mentioned, Pat, kind of bet the company type of case. Can you talk about the tiers of representation where it might be more likely for you to feel more comfortable to say, as if we're starting a relationship, let's start with this? I remember when my old firm first got into Coors, which is 2001, which it was just Coors. 2001, Sam Walker gave us a shot at doing a real estate deal, and that was his test of us to see, and that was actually me.
How'd you do?
Well,
Did well,
20
yeah.
years later, I'm still doing the real estate work, so I think I did pretty good. So again, think about, okay, I'm not going to go into Caliper Foods and start creating their 10Qs and their securities filings or whatever, their securities filings, but what level do you think somebody would say, hey, I'm a general corporate lawyer, my specialty is some contract reviews and contract distribution agreements or something. Where do you think somebody versus going to a big firm that has 20 different people doing things, what level do you think would be a decent pitch to guys like you to say, give me a shot at this, and then hopefully the relationship expands? What do you think?
It so depends on the project, in my mind anyway. So you were talking about lease reviews, and yeah, Brunstein was silly in turning that down. I shouldn't have. But lease reviews, there were plenty of lawyers, local lawyers, who were very good, who could do that work. And really, my goal was to find a law firm that would agree to the flat fee arrangement. That was the harder thing than finding somebody who could do the work. And we finally did. And actually, I liked the woman who was doing it so much that then I hired her in-house, which the firm was not happy with me about. But she was great. She's still around, Terry Winter. Conversely, we did what's called a all-company asset-backed securitization deal, and it was incredibly complex, and we were only the second company in the United States to ever do it. And so I went to the lawyer in New York who had done the first company, and once I got a sense that we could work together, and he was with Paul Weiss, so that was expensive. It was a big firm. I actually love Paul Weiss, but not because of the firm. I just have ended up working with various lawyers there and liked them all. But that was one, Jay, where it's not that there weren't smart, talented lawyers locally. There was no smart, talented lawyer, including myself, who had ever done that deal. And so I went to the group that had done the deal, and they did a great job for us. But would I go back to Paul Weiss and have him do lease reviews? Absolutely not. So.
Well, I think that's a great question, Jay. I think for me, what an approach that would work well for prospective external counsel would be to approach it in two ways. One, talk about whatever expertise you have or interest that you have, and number two, phrase it in the form of overflow. Overflow seems to be the magic word that certainly gets my attention, because I don't have enough time in the day to do everything that I need to do properly. And so if someone said, well, happy to provide support for you on overflow, what sorts of things do you have that you're working on? And that's a good way to approach it. So, if there's some specific expertise, even if it's, complex commercial agreements, I have a background in that and happy to provide support on overflow. To me, that presents itself as a very easy, non-threatening entry point. It's not making some huge commitment to sign a retainer with a huge law firm that all of a sudden is going to just steamroll over everything and have all of a sudden have 5 associates in my shorts just asking questions and trying to get things figured out, where it would just take more time than less. And I will say this, not to put a damper on anything here, but just to be very realistic, and that is, at least in terms of the legal departments that I've been in, we've had tremendous success with hiring law students from both CU and DU. And those students that have taken things like advanced contracts and transactional drafting and things like that, we've hired, and we certainly do, Sam and myself at MolsonCoors, brought them in to do some very basic contract review, like NDAs and some basic commercial agreements. All of this to say that if the support that you would be pitching or offering is on that level, we're likely already covered. And I might be unique in that, but things like NDAs and some very basic things are things that we're likely covered on. It's just 1 or 2 steps up from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because we didn't do that, and I think that's a function of the size of the organization. Like, we didn't have the ability, and remember, Colorado is by and large small business. There are not a lot of Fortune 500 companies here, and there are not a lot of big legal departments here. So we didn't have the staffing or the infrastructure to train somebody right out of law school. So we would always hire interns, like 2nd and 3rd years, because Phil Weiser would yell at us if we didn't.
Yeah.
And they were great. They were really helpful. But we almost had like a blanket rule that we would not hire right out of law school, that we needed some experience before hiring in. And so our company was more of an example where you would have an inroad in doing, stuff that's sort of day-to-day stuff that the company probably has 1 lawyer. Maybe they've hired 2 lawyers if they've gotten to a certain size.
Yep.
But that's where it can be really helpful to have outside counsel come in and just do routine stuff and let the inside counsel sort of focus on the non-routine stuff. Right. The other thing, I don't know if you thought about it, but it's a little off topic, I guess. But the state of Colorado uses outside counsel all the time. It's more of a thing to get in because we're required to use RFPs, whereas I think most small companies don't use RFPs. We didn't use RFPs. Did you guys use RFPs?
No.
Yeah, I don't think you see them a lot. But the state has to use them, so you have to go through the RFP process. But the AG's office appoints special assistant AGs to help both in litigation and in transactional stuff as overflow. The governor's office will appoint, agencies appoint, and you may not get your normal billable rate, but you might. It depends how much you're charging, I guess. But if you could get involved with that and you start to get a reputation, that's another way that all of a sudden now your name is out there. And a lot of us have been special assistant AGs at some point in our career, and again, it's kind of, we talk to each other, and so it's just something to think about. And it's not just litigation. You can imagine the state of Colorado has a lot of legal stuff going on. So,
Well, let's talk a little bit about fees. Let's talk about creativity, which law firms lack. So Oksana here
So many questions.
are really trying to create a fixed fee model where they could identify projects that here's our rate, here's what we're going to do for you, here's what it's going to cost you. Do you guys have any models that you've seen that are creative, that are other than just okay, $2,500 for a lease review? Are there other creative techniques that you've seen law firms or lawyers present that make a lot of sense?
You know, not off the top of my head, whether it's a hybrid of a flat fee and hourly, it's really almost case by case, issue by issue, lawyer by lawyer. But to the extent that you are open to considering it, that's a good thing.
So we've tried, and I'm rusty at this because I haven't had to do it for a while, but part of the problem I found is that law firms, even if they talk about alternative billing, internally they start with realization rates. So they're working backwards to, right? And so you kind of wind up in the same conversation, even though you're calling it something different. And I had an arrangement once with a law firm out of Chicago to defend franchise litigation. And so the deal was that from the day the lawsuit was filed until the day trial started was covered within a flat fee that we paid them every month. And it didn't matter how many lawsuits were filed. So we were, we could kind of predict what our litigation flow was going to be, and so that's how we sized the flat fee. And we knew, as you know, that most cases settle. And so you took a risk that you were actually going to try cases, and we did. We tried some cases, but you knew that by and large the cases were settled, so that by the time you were done, you hadn't gone beyond the flat fee. And that's where I was talking about, though. We grew. At one point we were opening 1,000 units a year, so all of a sudden, litigation started to ramp up, and that's when the lawyer came back to me and said, I can't. I know you don't want to talk about realization rate, but I'm down to like 20 cents an hour at this point. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And we adjusted it, and eventually we got to be too big, so it didn't work. But at least they were willing, they were willing to entertain it, and it was a pretty big firm. It became, at the time it was Rudnick and Wolf, and now it's DLA Piper. So, that was for a big firm to say, yeah, look, we'll try it. I was impressed. We would do a lot of our rule. My rule was you try and do 100% of contract work in-house. So we didn't have a lot of that. We tried to do almost 100% of merger and acquisition work in-house. There would be one or two a year that would be just too big, and we would need outside help with it. But for the most part, we did all of that in-house. But we would have a lot of transactional. We would try different things to see if it would work for the firm and for us to not have it on a billable hour. But a lot of times that's just where the law firms defaulted back to. It was just, we can't, it's going to be a billable hour.
I wasn't sure what your next question is, but I do see the section on how they collaborate with outside counsel. And I've got a couple of things that I want to get off my chest and share with you. No, all in the interest of really helping. This to me is so incredibly critical. We talked earlier about reputation. And so, speaking hypothetically, you're interested in landing work with an organization, small or large. And I know this sounds like a cliche, but just follow me on this. That interview process works both ways, because your life will be absolutely miserable if you get so excited you land this work with an organization and their chief legal officer, or like me, head of legal, is absolutely crazed, disorganized, calling you frantically, wanting the moon from you in 24 hours just because, based on their disorganization. It will not end well, and you want to protect your reputation, and so be mindful of that with those opportunities, because if your client is just so chaotic and confused and all over the map, chances are he or she will not have the greatest things to say about you, as a reference, and so you just want to be very careful about getting into a situation where it's just not workable, no matter how badly you may want it. If you still feel that you've got to go into it, and this is just an awesome opportunity, and you want to get work with this company, just gently set some parameters, and I think you'll be in a much better place. So I'll just tell you briefly how I view external counsel and how I like to collaborate. I view external counsel as really an extension of our in-house legal department, and it's built on trust and respect. I believe that my role as head of legal is also to run interference and protect all of you as my outside counsel, protect you from all of the phantom deadlines and BS requests coming from the business stakeholders who want the moon and want you to close a deal on New Year's Eve, knowing that it's just not really feasible. And so I view you as an extension of me, and like any colleague in the legal department internally, I will work to make sure that you're not inundated with unreasonable requests. The more forthright you are in terms of your schedule, you might have kids or family obligations. There's just great flexibility with me, and I would just say, let's talk about it. Worked with outside counsel who was in LA, and if any of you have lived in LA as I have, you can imagine he had to drop 3 children off at 3 separate schools around LA, so he was in the car for about 90 minutes every morning. But that last half hour was the half hour that I knew I could always reach him. And so he said, if you just work with me, with my kid's schedule. And so we twice a week we had this standing call at this time because I knew he would be in the car after dropping off his last, the third child. So there are ways to work. So I don't want to ramble on, but just 2 things. One, just be mindful of who you are going to do business with and support. It's number 1. And number 2, be forthright with whatever obligations or restrictions you have, and I guarantee you, if the chief legal officer and in-house counsel likes you, they will figure out a way. Certainly, I mean, that's been my experience.
Yeah, it's a great point. It raises one other thing that I hadn't thought of. The premise of this conversation has sort of been that there is an in-house lawyer who you're connecting with. And that is rare, actually. If you look at all of the businesses in the Front Range, most of them are too small to go hire an in-house lawyer. And so if you can, same thing, network with the business groups. Like, there are actually some pretty interesting business groups around Denver, like Concern. What's Ryan Heckman's thing now? It used to be Quarterly Forum, but it's...
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about.
It begins with a C. He renamed it for some reason.
There's Casey.
There's Casey. There's the Chamber, it's not like when we were owners of a small business that we had a lot of time to be involved with a lot of groups. We didn't, and obviously I was a lawyer, so I took that on. But it is a different way of getting inroads into companies that are looking. They're not looking to hire a lawyer. They don't have the money to hire somebody in-house, but they are looking for somebody who's interested in helping them with the day-to-day stuff. And the more inventive you can get with fee structures, the more proactive you can get with the business folks. They love that. I mean, they don't understand lawyers. They're like, we don't even like you guys. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But
and just to piggyback on what he said, if it's a small organization and they don't yet have their own in-house legal, then they're really looking for outside counsel to be solutions-oriented, creative. They're not looking for a lawyer to come in and over-engineer and over-lawyer a situation. Just break it down, bottom line,
Yeah.
and just say, happy to provide more, but for
Yeah.
now,
Totally.
yeah.
And the other thing is they're looking for a partner. They're looking for somebody that's going to help them work through a problem. So I've had young lawyers come in and say, well, that's a business issue. I can't talk about that. And you're like, okay.
it's all-
But it all blends together. And you may not make the ultimate decision. I get that. I don't want you to. But you got to think about you can't just say, well, the statute says this. Okay, go make your decision. And so the more that you can be collaborative with the business folks, and the more that you can give them, like options, and be as clear as you can, and when you go to a business person and say, who knows how that's going to come out, that's not what they want to hear.
Yeah, and again, to Pat's point, the converse is also true. So it's not just a lawyer saying, oh, well, no, that's a business issue. I don't need to weigh in on it. If the business is saying, oh, no, well, that's just a legal issue, it's really up to you to let them know that sometimes the two are inextricably bound. And with, just for example, in the commercial contract space, when it comes to issues of things like risk allocation, the limitation of liability provision, the indemnification provision, the reps and warranties provisions, all of those are tied to pricing. More and more so, certainly in the IT space, as vendors are getting more sophisticated, and they'll say, oh, well, if you want us to carve out these three things from the limitation of liability, we're going to have to update our pricing to reflect this risk allocation shift. So they're really, and the worst thing that to have happen is when the business people say, well, just go take care of the limitation of liability issues. You take care of them, and then you go back and they say, oh, well, the vendor just came back and they've modified the pricing, and what happened? So just an example of how more and more with vendors these days, they're really tied together because vendors are getting just savvier by the year.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So we're at our time limit, but I want to give some people, if you guys have a few more minutes to address
Sure.
questions.
Sure.
Anybody has any questions here that they want to ask of Guy or Rob?
You're not hands I'm fascinated in everything you're talking about. So I've done a completely flat fee outsourced general counsel model for about 5 years. My companies are generally in the range of 10 to 50 million in ARR. So it's exactly the model that you just talked about. And do a lot of those risk allocation provisions. But what I'm experimenting with right now, so a couple of things. Oksana is about scaling that model into new markets and finding really qualified general counsel attorneys who can be outsourced on a flat fee basis. And what I'm experimenting with is more like organizations like yours. What types of work? How do you make the decisions between hiring somebody in your legal department versus an outside law firm? And you've kind of answered this. Is it budget? Is it project-based? What sorts of things make sense? I've done 3 experiments which were all successful. We did a big $400 million M&A transaction where the in-house team of the selling company had 2 lawyers. And so one of my attorneys came in just for a 4-month basis. And we had a really innovative fee structure where we stepped up month over month as it got closer to the closing date. I've also done lease stuff. I just did this. It's a Phoenix company that has 15 restaurant locations, and they're looking to do 15 next year. So we came up with a monthly fee for that. And then the third is just an AGC role for an in-house team of 1. So what I was interested in, and you kind of answered a lot of this, but just other ideas or tips or things that would be really valuable to you if I'm building up outsourced general counsel who are billing only flat fee. Are there different examples like that would provide a lot of value to you that you'd be interested in?
I think so, but a lot of it just depends on the company case by case and sort of what their needs are, whether it's primarily research in the regulatory space or whether there are issues with their commercial contracts and certainly compliance issues, or it could be something as basic as we've just started selling our products online and we really need to beef up our privacy policy. Data privacy just seems to be one of those projects that, like develop something for us.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, so right now, we're running a Senate campaign, and I found out that there's like 3 people in the United States that know anything about FEC law. And so, and one of them works only for Democrats, one of them works only for Republicans, and then one of them will work for anybody, so they don't get hired very much. So we hired the one that works for Democrats. And my point is, we wouldn't, and a campaign is a small business in a way. It's not for profit, but it is an organization that has all of the other stuff that organizations have to deal with, HR and budgeting and all that. That's a model where it's so specific and specialized that I think it'd be difficult for you to have an inroad there. But when I was doing, the private side, it's what he was saying, and it's kind of what you were saying. A lot of it would be, at what point are you spending so much money on a recurring task that it makes more sense to bring it in-house?
Yeah.
And that was leasing. We got to the point that we were doing so many leases that it just made much more sense to bring it in-house. Whereas I would never bring litigation in-house for a lot of reasons. I mean, one, because you want an outside person who is standing up at court. Having been on the stand quite a few times, it would not be fun to also be the lawyer and trying to try the case. And you'd be probably conflicted anyway. So that we would never bring in. But you'd have other project type stuff where you would say, oh God, we could really use some help on this.
Yeah.
But we don't need to hire somebody full-time to do it.
Developing SOPs, standard operating procedures, and some very basic things like some HR policies, privacy policy. Just signature authority policy, who gets to sign what and when. That's what I know a lot of smaller companies are looking for, but they don't want to hire in-house counsel, but I see that as a point of entry.
That would help your trust and culture a lot, because theoretically you come in and do a project, and then we have the recurring.
So I have a quick question. You had talked about how you would treat, one of us doing overflow work for you. What's the other side of that coin? What do you expect from your outside counsel that's doing overflow work for you? What, as far as working with the business, as far as working with you?
Yeah. Again, it would depend case by case. For example, it would depend on the urgency of the assignment, or it would depend on the expertise of the business stakeholder. There might be an issue that is just over my head, and I might say to our outside counsel, you know what, I'm going to bring you in, connect you to, and just as external counsel, CC me on the emails, but knock yourselves out. It just really depends case by case. And then there are other times when I would want to keep you on the sideline, and the direction would be, I just really want you to make me look like a rock star. And it's as simple as that. Just do what you do, but just send it all to me. So it just depends case by case. But what is important, regardless, is to try and set up those expectations and deliverables so that your in-house person knows that you know what they're looking for. I don't know if that helps.
I wanted to, again, I think less law. John, you have just a couple words to add?
Just a couple of words. Some things did stick out to me in this presentation, but we're happy to work with LawBank. I will do anything to help any of the LawBank attorneys with any single issue that you have, or certainly put together a plan for you. And I do that kind of on a regular basis. In particular, what applies to what's happening here is our product called Practical Law. The comment that kind of struck me was when you said you had 5 associates in your shorts. Practical Law helps with that particular issue within a law firm, or the folks that have to deal with those issues. So that's really all I have to say about product and stuff, but I'm happy to help you in any way. If you need a password for a day or two to look up something, or if you feel like you need a plan, we can work on that. However I can be of assistance, please feel free to let me know. And I'm usually at the Uptown office, and if I'm sitting at the table there. Feel free to come ask me a question if you need to.
Shelley, with U.S. Legal Support, thank you again for this.
Oh, sure, thank you. Well, with Hunter Geist US Legal, we're court reporting video. We can be that partner for you with setting up your depositions. We're really a one-stop shop. So our clients will call they need an interpreter for a deposition. They want to take a deposition out of state, and we can find locations. It isn't just in Denver, we've got that national presence, but we really are a one-stop shop, and we're here to help in any way we can.
Thank you. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you,
Great.
gentlemen.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I'm not as much as
I just wanted to say thanks for coming. I hired you one question before you guys run.
Yeah.